Chapter 419. After all the arrangements were made, Su Luan went to the palace with his 2 guards. The palace of the Kingdom of Florence was located in the north of San Filto City, in the center of the noble district. When Su Len came here, the whole palace had been occupied by the army of the Duchy of North Wind. Led by the 2 guards, Su Len went to find Phyllis. "Phyllis, what's wrong?" Su Len came to Phyllis, gently hugged her crying body, and asked, "Su Len, boo-hoo, boo-hoo. My father is dead. My mother is dead. They're all dead." After seeing Su Len, Phyllis suddenly threw herself into Sullen's arms and cried bitterly. "Cry, cry, cry, and you'll be fine. I've avenged you, and I've killed the devil behind the scenes. You still have me." Su Len hugged Phyllis and comforted her. Finally, Phyllis was tired of crying. The fatigue of rushing for many days came, and she fell asleep in Sullen's arms. Su Len carried Phyllis and put her in a bedroom in the side hall. He arranged for the maids and guards to wait for her, and at the same time, checked King Hengli's body. After all, King Hengli was his father-in-law, and he was going to inherit the inheritance this time, so he naturally had to treat it seriously. King Hengli's body was in the hall, and next to it was the queen's coffin. After seeing King Hengli's body, Su Len found that King Hengli had been dead for 2 days, and his body was only casually collected in the coffin without any funerary objects or any measures to protect the body. The body was slightly smelly. He didn't know who helped him collect the corpses, but his subordinates were still around. Before he died, they couldn't sit still. After he died, they didn't even care. They directly stopped the corpses and attacked. This king was quite a failure. Su Len snapped his fingers and a light flashed. A crystal-clear coffin covered the corpse. This was an ice coffin that could be used to temporarily preserve the corpse. After preserving the 2 corpses, Su Len found a quiet palace and walked in. After finishing his work, he still hadn't had time to count his gains. He opened the system space. This time, he had obtained 5 platinum treasure chests. First, he took a shower and changed his clothes. After washing his hands, Su Len sat down again and calmed himself down. Only then did Su Len choose to open the treasure chest. As a dazzling light flashed by, the familiar sound of the system notification rang in his ears. "Congratulations, host. You have opened the platinum treasure chest. You have obtained a bottle of Jade Shaving's golden pills. Congratulations, host. You've opened the platinum treasure chest. You've obtained the Building of Wonders blueprint, Qilin Garden. Congratulations, host. You have opened the platinum treasure chest. You have obtained 1 army talisman. Congratulations, host. You have opened the platinum treasure chest. You have obtained the item, Thunder Secret Technique. Congratulations, host. You have opened the platinum treasure chest. You have obtained the item, Mechanical Secret Technique. After the light dissipated, Su Len immediately looked at the items that he had just obtained. There were 10 Jade Shaving's golden pills in a bottle. The effect was that it could increase any attribute by 1 point. Su Len planned to add them to his agility and spirit. In addition to the 2 attribute points that he had obtained from leveling up, Sullen's attributes were getting closer and closer to 50. A new Building of Wonders blueprint, Qilin Garden. Su Len was looking forward to this new Building of Wonders. He picked up the blueprint and began to look at it. Building of Wonders blueprint, Qilin Garden. Category: Beast Pen. This blueprint records the detailed steps and process of building Qilin Garden. Qilin Garden, Building of Wonders. Beast Pen. Legend has it that this is the place where the mythical beast Qilin once lived. With Qilin Garden, the mounts in the city can become stronger and faster. It can also increase their growth rate, reduce the chances of the mounts falling sick, increase the reproduction rate of the mounts, and have a chance of attracting wild mounts. Rapid growth plus 35, indestructible plus 30, rare beasts plus 35, sturdiness plus 36, reproduction plus 35, disease reduction plus 35, mount taming plus 37, mutation plus 10. Additional effect, Mythical Beast's Might. Mythical Beast's Might possesses the aura of the mythical beast Qilin, can forcibly tame mounts one at a time. Seeing the effects of this building of wonders blueprint, Sullen's eyes lit up. This Qilin garden was a good thing. Not only could it increase the growth rate of mounts, but it could also make them stronger and faster. Moreover, the special effect mythical beasts might could actually forcibly tame mounts. Then, if he caught a giant dragon, could he try the effect? Also, with this building, it would be much easier to tame your own creatures in the future. Of course, with so many benefits, it wasn't easy to build this building of wonders. The most important thing was that he needed a Qilin horn. This was the first time he had heard of such a thing. This world didn't even have a Qilin, so where was he going to find one? After putting away the building of wonders blueprint, Su Len could only wait until he had a Qilin horn before building it. The third box opened up a commander's seal. This commander's seal was a little special. The word female was written on it. Obviously, this was a female commander's seal. Commander's seal, female soldier. After use, you can recruit 1,000 female soldiers. Female soldiers have the ability to move quickly and agilely, and have decent attack power. Female soldier, elite female soldier, guard female soldier, female official star officer. It was actually a female soldier. Su Len looked at the commander's seal in his hand in surprise. In the game, female soldiers weren't very strong. Most of the time, they were considered cannon fodder. However, this didn't mean that they were useless. Female soldiers were only powerful in the later stages. When they were promoted to star officer, they could summon lightning. They were completely a magical soldier. Besides being strong, female soldiers had another advantage. They were beautiful. Using female soldiers to guard the palace was a good choice. Su Len chose to use it immediately. The commander's seal instantly turned into countless fluorescent lights and then merged into Sullen's body. Although female soldiers were strong in the later stages, they were very weak in the early stages. Moreover, the recruitment and training cost was not cheap. When recruiting female soldiers, he would have to build a new female soldier barracks and a training ground. Su Len planned to wait for a while before building it. The remaining 2 platinum treasure chests contained 2 books, one of which was Thunder's Secret Arts. Su Luen skimmed through it and found that it recorded a large number of thunder and lightning spells. For Su Luen, this was exactly what he needed. With this book, his understanding of the power of thunder and lightning would be improved once again. At the same time, he could also learn more thunder and lightning skills. Secret Mechanical Techniques. This book was an advanced knowledge of mechanical control that Su Len had learned before. After obtaining the secret mechanical techniques, Sullen's magic skills had become more powerful. He could even improve the iron golems. The 2 books contained a lot of knowledge. Su Len planned to take some time to study them. In addition to the 5 platinum treasure chests, Su Len also obtained a legendary level soul crystal from the Pleasure Devil and a bottle of fallen angel's blood. The soul crystal was a good thing and could be used in many places. Su Len planned to leave it for Hathaway to make a legendary golem. As for the fallen angel's blood, it was not very useful. After all, there was only 1 bottle. It was impossible to refine the blood. He could only give it to Hathaway as a test material. After putting these things away, Su Len took out the jade shard golden pill and poured out one. This pill looked like a piece of jade. It looked very beautiful and melted in his mouth. After using it, Su Len soon felt his body heating up slightly. 1 free attribute point had also been added to the system interface. Next, Su Len ate the remaining jade shard golden pills. Su Len obtained 10 free attribute points. After adding the 2 points from leveling up, he had a total of 12 points. He evenly distributed them to agility and spirit. After dealing with the harvest, Su Len began to deal with the following matters. After occupying Sanfilto, Su Len controlled the heart of the Kingdom of Florence. There were many things to be done next. After controlling the entire city, Su Len began to send people to check on the remaining members of the Henry family. Because of a battle for the throne, 3 princes had died directly. King Henry had a total of 5 sons and 4 daughters. The remaining 2 sons had also died in the previous turmoil. After all, during the battle with the Pleasure Devil, many nobles had died because of the Pleasure Devil. The two princes were unlucky and also died. Su Len could guarantee that he definitely did not kill them. In other words, there were no male members of the Henry family in the direct line of descent. Of course, as a family that had lasted for hundreds of years, there were still many men in the collateral line of the Henry family. However, regardless of whether it was Su Len or others, they would not have the right to inherit the throne. The four princesses of the Henry family had long been married off to the great nobles and members of the royal families of other countries. In addition, they were far away from here, so they could be ignored directly. Therefore, the one who had the most right to inherit the throne was Sulen's wife, Phyllis. In fact, queens were not rare in this world. No, they were very common. Not to mention, the most famous queen on the continent was the Red Dragon Queen. There were also many queens in other countries. There was basically no problem for Phyllis to ascend the throne. However, considering Phyllis's political intelligence and skills, and her complete lack of experience in governing a country, it was necessary to implement a two-king system. Su Len intended to become the king of the Kingdom of Florence together with Phyllis. As for whether the remaining nobles in San Filto agreed or not, it was not a problem in Sulen's eyes at all. Those who did not agree had already died in the attack of the Pleasure Devil. The remaining nobles firmly supported this decision. After restoring order in the city, Su Len and Phyllis buried the king and queen. After some discussion, they decided to implement the two-king system. Next, Su Len asked people to arrange the ascension ceremony. In fact, the materials needed for the ascension ceremony had already been prepared long ago. There were 3 portions, one for each of the 3 princes. Now, it was all convenient for him. Chapter 420. After taking complete control of San Filto, Su Len and Hathaway held a funeral to bury the king and queen. After that, they discussed the preparations for the ascension ceremony. Because Su Len did not lift the ban, the nobles did not know that Su Len was preparing to ascend the throne. Perhaps some smart people had guessed it, but they could only pretend to be deaf and dumb in the face of the powerful Su Len. All the materials needed for the ascension ceremony had been prepared. As soon as Su Len gave the order, the attendants began to get busy. With the materials prepared by the 3 princes, it only took 2 days for the ascension ceremony to be completed. On the 3rd day, Su Len lifted the ban, and the nobles of San Filto were invited to the palace to watch the ceremony. In the main hall of the palace, the nobles of San Filto had gathered in the imperial court. In just a month, the situation had changed. The few princes who were most likely to become the new king of the Kingdom of Florence had disappeared. The nobles who were bustling in the main hall had become sparse. These nobles were naturally aware of today's ascension ceremony. Now that the princes were dead and there were no successors, they naturally hoped that the Parliament of Nobles would jointly elect a new king instead of letting Su Len decide alone. Even though Su Len had shown great strength last time, these nobles who were used to being high and mighty had not changed their views. Count Anthony, Duke Su Len held the ascension ceremony without permission, which violated the laws of the Kingdom of Florence. I think Marquis Kent is more qualified to inherit the throne, Viscount Goen whispered to Count Anthony. Although Su Len was powerful, he was not a noble of the kingdom after all. Although he had tyrannical strength, no one was willing to give up power. In their opinion, even if there was a new king, it was still up to them to govern the kingdom. Count Anthony looked at Goen and then at the nobles in the hall. Many of them still wanted to renegotiate with the Parliament of Nobles. Even though they had seen Sulen's strength, some of them were still unwilling to believe it. In their opinion, the kingdom had no successor, and it was a good opportunity for them to expand their power. These people had been in the upper echelons for too long and had forgotten the most basic rules of this world. Let's talk about it later. Besides, Duke Sulen's attitude today has already made it clear that he wants to make it an established fact. Don't you think it's a little late? Anthony shook his head and didn't intend to stand out. As an old fox, he wouldn't easily take a stand, let alone stand out personally. This Duke Su Len has gone too far. If he hadn't forced us not to go out, how could we not know what he wants to do until today when we are about to ascend the throne? Goen snorted coldly, obviously very angry. Don't talk so much. No matter what, he did save our lives. A middle-aged noble tugged at his clothes and said softly, but his eyes were looking at a few servants standing in the hall. The king was dead, the 3 princes were dead, and the entire palace was under Sullen's control. These attendants were naturally loyal to Sulen. If they heard these words, they would definitely spread it to Sulen. What? Do you think he can kill me? This is the kingdom of Florence, not his Beifong principality in the countryside. Goen didn't appreciate it, but said with disdain. In his opinion, the Beifong principality in the northern wilderness was a small country, and Sulen was a bumpkin from the countryside. Ignorant. Anthony glanced at him, and his body involuntarily moved a few steps away from him. Obviously, he didn't want to talk to him anymore. The morning sun dispelled the darkness in the palace, and the magnificent palace looked very solemn in the morning sun. Sulen and Phyllis were changing into gorgeous clothes with the help of several maids. My lord, the ceremony is ready, and all the nobles have arrived. A middle-aged attendant said respectfully. Very good. How are the nobles doing? Sulen sat in his seat and let 2 maids help him put on his robe. As my lord expected, there are some nobles who are dissatisfied with your arrangement. The attendant said respectfully. Sulen played with a ruby and said casually, give them some time to calm down. If they still can't recognize the situation, I don't mind helping them. The old era is over, and the new era is coming. Those who can't keep up with the times will be abandoned by the times. Sulen was very clear about the nobles' thoughts, but he couldn't kill all of them at once. After all, he still needed them to serve him for the time being. But before that, he needed to distinguish between those who needed to be eliminated, those who were willing to rely on him, those who could be won over, and those who were old foxes sitting on the fence. Sulen was very clear about the nobles' thoughts. There was a saying, kill the chicken to warn the monkey. Those who jumped the highest and cried the loudest were the chickens that were killed. My lord, when are you going to start? The attendant asked respectfully. Wait a little longer. Sulen put down the ruby and smiled at Phyllis. Come and take a look at the crown I prepared for you. Suluin took out a beautiful crown from the storage space and handed it to Phyllis. The crown was made of gold. Of course, in order to ensure its hardness, it was also mixed with some other metals. But on the surface, it still looked golden. The crown was designed with a hollow design and looked very delicate. There were 3 gemstones inlaid on the front of the crown, 1 big and 2 small. At this moment, they were shining in the morning sun. So beautiful. Phyllis's eyes widened in surprise at the sight of the beautiful crown. Come, let me put it on for you. Sulen smiled and stood up. Phyllis nodded and bowed slightly. Sulen put the crown on Phyllis's head and stepped back. He bowed slightly and said, My dear queen, you are so beautiful. Really? Phyllis twirled around with the crown on her head and winked at Sulen. Of course, you are the most beautiful today, Sulen said seriously. Phyllis smiled and then lifted the corner of her dress to make a bow to Sulen. My king, you are also very handsome today. Ha ha! Phyllis couldn't help but laugh as soon as she finished the bow. All right, it's almost time. We should go and ascend the throne. Sulen and Phyllis played for a while and then looked at the time. Phyllis nodded. Okay. Sulen took Phyllis to the outside of the palace under the protection of many attendants. Cain, the guard of the palace, was already waiting there. When he saw Sulen, he immediately greeted him respectfully. The group continued to walk into the palace. My lord! As soon as they entered the palace, the attendants and soldiers of North Wind Principality all saluted. When the nobles in the palace saw Sulen and Phyllis coming in, they stopped talking and looked at them. Some of these people sneered, some were dissatisfied, some were expressionless, and some were fearful. No matter what, Sullen's strength had made some of them afraid. I'm very sorry to have kept you waiting. Sulen looked at these nobles and said with a smile, Mr. Sulen, you are not a noble of the Kingdom of Florence. Why didn't you go through the Parliament of Nobles to choose a king? This seriously violates the system of the Kingdom of Florence. It is illegal. As soon as they walked into the hall, a noble asked righteously. The entire palace became silent in an instant. It was so quiet that it was scary. Sullen's smile froze for a moment. Then he stopped smiling and turned to look at the owner of the voice. He said with a bit of contempt, "Who are you?" "You." Hearing Sullen's words, this middle-aged noble was furious. This was openly despising him and his family. "I am Viscount Goen, a member of the Parliament of Nobles." "Oh." Sulen nodded and said, "I don't know you." "You." Goen widened his eyes in anger. Fortunately, he understood his purpose. He suppressed his anger and said, "I am a member of the Parliament of Nobles. What you are doing is against the law of the Kingdom of Florence. Are you teaching me how to do things?" Sulen raised his eyebrows. "You are acting recklessly. You won't be recognized by the nobles of Florence." Sulen looked at him coldly and said, "Phyllis, the daughter of His Majesty King Henry, naturally has the right to inherit the throne after all of King Henry's sons died. This is in accordance with the law and rules. As for the Parliament of Nobles, they only have the right to choose a successor after the royal family has no children or after the royal family abdicates and gives up the right to inherit. Therefore, it is reasonable and legal for Phyllis to inherit the throne, and it is in line with the national conditions of Florence. You are not a noble of the Kingdom of Florence. This is the internal affairs of the Kingdom of Florence. You have no right to interfere." After hearing Sullen's words, Goen said with an ugly expression, "I have no right to interfere?" Su Luen sneered and took a step forward. He stared at Gon coldly and then glanced at the surrounding nobles. "When San Felto City was in danger, I saved it. This city was also conquered by me from the chaos. Can be said that it is my spoils of war. Phyllis is also my wife. Speaking of which, I am also your savior. How dare you say that I don't have the right to be your savior? What were you doing at that time? You were a fool who was being played by a devil. That was because we were waiting for an opportunity to delay time. Yes, waiting for an opportunity to delay time for the army to arrive." Goen was a little speechless. "The army to rescue the king? How many days have passed? Why haven't I seen the army to rescue the king? Are you delaying time like this?" Sulen looked at him mockingly. "Are you sure that the army to rescue the king will arrive in time to collect your corpses?" Goen's face was a little pale and he said stubbornly, "This is not within your jurisdiction." Chapter 421. "You can't say anything, right?" Sulen glanced at him and ignored him. He held Phyllis's hand and continued to move forward. "I saved San Filto City and killed the demon to avenge the dead. Now that the kingdom has no ruler, I naturally have the right to choose an heir to ascend the throne." Sulen said loudly, his eyes sweeping across the hall. "From today onwards, Phyllis is the queen of the Kingdom of Florence, and I will ascend the throne as the king of the Kingdom of Florence. Sulen, you are just a nobleman who was lucky enough to gain a foothold. You are just a bumpkin. What right do you have to ascend the throne?" After hearing Sulen announce himself as the king of the Kingdom of Florence, Gon's face changed greatly. "You are asking for death. Kill." Sullen's eyes flashed coldly, and his heart was filled with murderous intent. He shouted sternly, "Yes." Cain, who had been waiting in the hall for a long time, immediately rushed over. Before anyone could react, he raised his sword and slashed down, killing Gon. The football-sized head flew up, and blood splashed 3 feet away. The noblemen who had not yet reacted were instantly sprayed with blood all over their faces. Then they screamed and hurriedly fled in all directions. Bang! The headless body fell down, and the strong smell of blood instantly filled the hall. "Clean it up," Sulen said expressionlessly. Several attendants skillfully carried the body away, and 2 more people wiped the blood clean. Then they poured a bucket of water to wash and wipe. In just a few minutes, the floor looked brand new. If it were not for the smell of blood in the air, everyone would think that the scene just now was just an illusion. Well, the people who are in the way have been sent away. Who else has any last words, no opinions about Phyllis and me ascending the throne? Su Len said after looking around. Wherever he looked, all the noblemen couldn't help but lower their heads. What opinions? Those were last words. Didn't you see the example just now? Hurry up and ascend the throne, we have no opinions. I am a very democratic person. Everyone can speak freely. If you have any opinions, you can raise them. I will consider them seriously. Su Len said seriously. No opinions, no opinions. The other noblemen in the hall said one after another. You really don't have any objections? I'm giving you a chance, Su Len emphasized. I really don't mind. It seems that my ascension to the throne is what everyone wants. Su Len nodded with satisfaction, and then said, Then let's continue the ceremony. The grand coronation ceremony continued. Su Len took out the crown and crowned Phyllis and then himself. The nobles below cooperated very well. They cheered when they should, and bowed when they should. Everything was so harmonious. The enthronement ceremony ended amidst peaceful cheers. Congratulations, host. You have successfully ascended the throne. A large amount of data flashed before Sullen's eyes. Congratulations, host. Your duchy has been upgraded to a kingdom. The country template is currently being upgraded. Importing national data. Ding. It has been detected that the host's actual territories are Beifeng Duchy and Fighter City. Please take control of more territories as soon as possible. Ding. Please take control of the Kingdom of Florence as soon as possible. Congratulations, host. You have successfully upgraded to a kingdom. You have received a diamond treasure chest. Congratulations, host. You have successfully upgraded to a kingdom. Your imperial jade seal has been upgraded. Congratulations, host. You have successfully upgraded to a kingdom. You have received a miracle building blueprint. A series of system prompts sounded in his ears. However, the reward for upgrading to a kingdom this time was much less than the reward for establishing a duchy. Of course, it was very likely that Su Len did not fully control the Kingdom of Florence. Only when Su Len fully controlled the Kingdom of Florence would all the rewards be issued. Although the rewards were much less, Su Len was still in a good mood. He opened the system and began to check the rewards this time. A diamond treasure chest, a miracle building blueprint, and an upgraded imperial jade seal. Su Len opened the diamond treasure chest, and a gorgeous light and shadow effect flashed before his eyes. The next second, a familiar system prompt sounded in Sullen's ears. Congratulations, host. You have successfully opened the diamond treasure chest. You have received the book, Elemental Fission and Elemental Fusion. After hearing the system prompt, Su Len was slightly stunned. He immediately reacted. The book Elemental Fission and Elemental Fusion was actually opened from the treasure chest. Just by hearing the name, one could tell that this book was a book about the knowledge of the elemental furnace. Su Len simply flipped through it. This book was not only about theoretical knowledge, but it also included a large amount of data and detailed steps. However, it was still very difficult to produce according to the data in the book. Of course, this book was not without benefits. It helped Su Len save a lot of time. It pointed him in the right direction, and he did not have to take any detours. After putting away the book Elemental Fission and Elemental Fusion, Su Len picked up the miracle building blueprint that he had just received. This blueprint was a little special. It was called Ipang Palace. It was actually an architectural blueprint of a palace complex. Miracle building blueprint, Ipang Palace. It records the blueprint of a large palace complex. After using it, Ipang Palace can be built. Su Len looked at the blueprint. The construction of such a palace complex could not be completed in a short period of time. Moreover, it would require a lot of manpower and material resources. For the current Su Len, it was not worth it. This blueprint could only be used after a long time. Casually putting away the miracle building blueprint, Su Len stretched his body and began to deal with other matters. After Su Len and Phyllis ascended to the throne, Su Len sent official documents in his and Phyllis's name to the surrounding cities to announce the legitimacy of the throne. The news received was mixed. The territories that were originally under the direct control of the kingdom had already accepted the appointment and recognized Sulen and Phyllis as the king and queen. Some of the remaining nobles recognized Sulen and Phyllis. Some of them were watching with ambiguous attitudes, and some of them directly declared that Sulen and Phyllis's thrones were illegitimate and refused to recognize them as the king and queen. Sulen had already prepared himself for this situation. He tried to rope in the nobles who accepted the appointment directly. He also sent people to those who were neutral and ambiguous. As for those who refused, he issued official documents requesting them to immediately surrender and personally apologize to San Filto. Naturally, the nobles would not agree to such a request. However, Sulen did not want them to agree. This would only show that he had too much. At the same time, Sulen began to recruit soldiers in San Filto and the territories under the direct control of the royal family. Due to the previous war, the soldiers in San Filto had suffered heavy casualties. He was now preparing to rebuild the army. At the same time, after the reconstruction was completed, he would crusade against the rebellious lords. However, while Sulen was busy, an unexpected piece of news came. "You said that Marquis Savoy sent people?" Sulen asked. "Yes, your majesty." As the most powerful lord in the northern provinces, Marquis Savoy was also the other successor of the Kingdom of Florence. However, he was a little unlucky. It was not easy for him to wait for such a good opportunity. In the end, when he arrived at San Filto, Sulen had already ascended the throne, giving him no chance at all. However, Marquis Savoy knew that he had not made his stance clear yet. If he announced that he supported Sulen, the nobles in the northern part of Florence would not be able to do anything. Those who were neutral would probably immediately preside over Sulen. Even many nobles who were clearly against him would change their minds. "Let him in," Sulen said. "Yes, your majesty." The servant bowed and slowly retreated. About 5 minutes later, the servant walked in with a young man. "Your majesty, the eldest son of Marquis Savoy is here." "Vader, long time no see." Sulen smiled and stood up. "Long time no see, your grace." Vader bowed respectfully. Hearing how Vader addressed him, Sulen did not have any expression. He was still smiling. "Sir Vader, why have you come to see me this time?" "Your grace, my father does not agree with what you have done this time." "Is that so? I heard that when you came to San Filto, you brought an army of 10,000 men. Why are you preparing to go to war with me?" Sulen said in a low voice. "We did not mean that. We only brought the army to protect my safety," Vader said with a shrug. "Protect your safety?" Sulen rolled his eyes. "You need to bring an army of 10,000 men to protect my safety? I know that you are upset that I became king first, but what is done cannot be undone. It is better to accept it." Vader shook his head and continued. "Your grace, your situation is not very good now. 1/3 of the nobles in the entire kingdom are against you. Why are you unwilling to give up the throne? If you agree to give up the throne, the Savoy family is willing to bear your expenses this time and compensate you. It seems that you want to replace me." Sulen instantly understood the Savoy family's plan. The Savoy family wanted to replace the Henry family as the new royal family of Florence. "This is a normal transfer of power within the Kingdom of Florence," Vader said. Sulen smiled slightly. "Do you think your strength is enough?" Vader glanced at Sulen and said, "I still have to thank Sir Sulen for the life essence last time. After using it, my father has already advanced to the legendary level." "Advanced to the legendary level? No wonder you are so confident. But the legendary level is different from the legendary level." Sulen shook his head. "How about this? I can give you a chance. I will fight with your father. As long as he can win, I will withdraw and hand over the Kingdom of Florence to you. And if I win, I don't need you to pay anything. You just need to announce that I am the king of the Kingdom of Florence. I need to go back and report to my father. Then I will tell you the result," Vader said with a nod. "Of course." Sulen nodded. Chapter 422. Vader quickly left Sanfilto City and returned to the encampment of the army in Cult City without stopping. He then went straight to the largest tent in the center. "Father, I'm back," Vader said respectfully to the Marquis of Savoy. "Have a seat." The Marquis of Savoy nodded. After Vader sat down, he asked, "What did he say?" "His Excellency Sulen doesn't agree to abdicate," Vader said. "Humph. That's not surprising." The Marquis of Savoy sneered. He stood up from his seat and walked to the map placed in the tent. "No one will easily give up power that's at their fingertips. Moreover, 1/3 of the territory has already recognized him as the king." "What else did he say?" The Marquis of Savoy picked up a charcoal pencil and marked on the map. "He said that if Father wants to compete with him for the throne, we'll have to fight him. If you win, he'll choose to withdraw and give up the Kingdom of Florence. If we lose, we'll have to recognize him as the king of the Kingdom of Florence," Vader said in a low voice. "Father, I think we should just attack directly. As long as we mobilize, I believe many nobles will follow suit. When the time comes, Sanfilto City won't be able to stop us." "Mobilize? That's easy for you to say." The Marquis of Savoy glanced at his son and put the charcoal pencil back. "It's easy to mobilize, but what about after that? Many nobles will respond, but most of them won't put in any effort. They'll wait for us and Sulen to fight until both sides suffer, then take advantage of the situation. Don't think too highly of those nobles. What kind of people are they? They won't act until they see the hair." The Marquis of Savoy snorted. After circling the tent twice, the Marquis of Savoy said, "Looks like we can only use battle." After thinking for a long time, the Marquis of Savoy nodded in agreement. He was very confident in his own strength. In his impression, although Sulen had a record of killing a legendary orc, that orc was already seriously injured. Therefore, he felt that he should be on par with Sulen. What he didn't know was that different people had different physiques, and the same applied to legends as well. The next step was to discuss the time and place. These matters were quickly finalized. The two sides agreed to fight 30 miles northeast of Fether City. The time was set for 3 days later in the morning. After discussing the details of the battle, Sulen began to deal with other matters. He was preparing to build a military camp in Sanfilto. Originally, more than half of the soldiers in Sanfilto had been killed or injured. Although Sulen later took in some scattered soldiers, these soldiers were far from being elite. Therefore, he was preparing to build a military camp and recruit new soldiers. He would also send the original soldiers to the military camp for training. Only after going through such training could these soldiers reach the standard of a qualified soldier of Beifeng Principality. After Sulen ascended the throne, the southern provinces had the most opposition. In fact, Sulen's reputation was mostly spread in the northern provinces. Not many people in the south knew about it, and since a long time ago, the southern provinces had looked down on the northern provinces. The main reason was the economic disparity. For the southern provinces, the northerners were a group of barbarians who liked to fight and kill. What's more, Sulen's territory was in the northern wilderness, which was further north of the northern provinces. In their eyes, it was a completely barren land. The best way to make these people admit that Sulen was the king was to persuade them physically. Sulen didn't plan to transfer the army of Beifeng Principality, so he could only rebuild the army in Sanfilto. Compared to Beifeng City, the conditions in Sanfilto were much better. At least there were more than 150,000 people here. With enough manpower, the construction of the military camp was very fast. In addition to the ordinary military camp, Sulen also built a military camp for female soldiers. Su Luan was going to let the maids in the palace serve as the first batch of female soldiers in the military camp. There were still a lot of female soldiers in this world. The most famous one was the Amazon female warriors in the southern rainforest. Don't think that they were easy to bully just because they were women. In fact, the Amazon female warriors were very powerful. In addition to the Amazon female warriors, there were also female soldiers among the elves, especially among the drows. Sulen's plan to build female soldiers didn't attract much attention. Most people just thought it was the king's hobby. While the military camp was being built, Su Len began to clean up Sanfilto. The first thing to be changed was the sanitation. Su Len was used to the cleanliness of Beifeng City. After coming to Sanfilto, he hated the dirty streets. So after the city settled down, Su Len began to set up sanitation regulations to clean the streets. There was plenty of manpower in Sanfilto City, and Su Luen easily recruited a large number of workers. Although they were called workers, most of them were actually poor people. More than 90% of the cities in the world had slums. These people were cheap and only needed a small amount of money to hire them. After having the manpower, Su Len began to issue laws. No one was allowed to dump garbage or feces on the streets. Violators would be fined and sentenced to 1 week of unpaid labor. Of course, this kind of thing couldn't just be an order. If people were not allowed to dump garbage everywhere, they had to be given a place to dump garbage. Otherwise, this order would not be beneficial to the people but harmful. Su Len selected some people from the slums and divided Sanfilto into districts. Each district would have a garbage transfer station. The residents and merchants around would need to send their garbage here. Then, these people would drive the garbage out of the city every morning. At the same time, Su Len also sent people to start building public toilets in each district. After these things were built, Su Len issued a ban on dumping garbage and defecating everywhere. The nobles in the city were puzzled as to why Su Len wasn't in a hurry to quell the rebellion. However, under Sullen's power, they were very well behaved on the surface. However, under Sullen's power, they were constantly up to no good in private. In order to obtain information, Su Len formed the Embroidered Uniform Guard. Now that he was the king, Su Len naturally expanded the Embroidered Uniform Guard. However, the Embroidered Uniform Guard wasn't something that just anyone could become. Su Len could only recruit 20 people from other places and use these 20 people to build the framework. Then, he would recruit others and quickly establish the Embroidered Uniform Guard. With the Embroidered Uniform Guard, Su Len would be able to know every move of the nobles in Sanfilto. With the Embroidered Uniform Guard collecting information, it would be very useful when Su Len went to quell the rebellion of the nobles. There was no need to say how useful information was in a war. Scouting, eavesdropping, breaking ties, spreading rumors, acting as a spy, and so on were too many. Time passed quickly, and 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Early in the morning, Su Len left some instructions to Phyllis and then left Sanfilto alone. As for the soldiers of Beifeng Duchy, they stayed behind to protect the palace and prevent the nobles from causing trouble when Su Len wasn't around. The Pegasus was very fast, and it only took 10 minutes to arrive at the location of the battle. When Su Len arrived, he found that Marquis Savoy was already waiting there. In addition to him, there were about 500 cavalrymen waiting not far away. Su Len took a few glances and didn't pay attention to them. "Long time no see, Marquis Savoy," Su Len said as he dismounted. "Long time no see, Duke Beifeng." Savoy nodded. After a few simple pleasantries, both sides went into the main topic. "Marquis Savoy, we are clear about the conditions. Do you have any objections?" Su Len asked. "No. That's good. When you lose, Marquis Savoy, don't go back on your word," Su Len said with a smile. "Haha, Marquis Savoy is too confident. I was worried that Marquis Savoy would go back on his word. Don't worry, I can still afford to lose. Besides, how could I lose?" Savoy said confidently. Su Len smiled. "In that case, let's begin." "Okay." Su Len took out his storm war halberd, while Savoy took out a two-handed heavy sword. As soon as they were ready, rays of light flashed past Sullen's body. Greater haste. Slow! Arcane Missile X3. A spiritual light instantly enveloped the Marquis of Savoy's body. He felt his body sink, as if he was standing in mud. His movements were clearly much slower. Before he could react, a series of arcane missiles flew at him. Savoy's expression changed slightly. He dodged while blocking. Su Len took the opportunity to rush up and smash down with his storm war halberd. The battered and exhausted Savoy didn't care about his reputation. He rolled to the side to dodge. The storm war halberd fiercely smashed into the ground, and then the war halberd swept across, raising a large amount of dirt into the air. The war halberd carried a biting cold wind, and the wind blew the dirt away in all directions, covering a radius of a few meters. If one was not prepared, one's eyes would be blinded if they were not careful. Savoy was also very experienced in battle. The moment the dirt flew up, he covered his eyes with one hand and swung his heavy two-handed sword with the other. Whirlwind slash. Clang. The heavy sound of metal clashing rang out as the storm war halberd and the two-handed heavy sword collided. Savoy's weapon was of good quality, and it wasn't damaged by the storm war halberd. However, as soon as they came into contact, Savoy felt an irresistible force. Before he could adjust himself, a storm of attacks descended upon him. The Marquis of Savoy could only defend himself pathetically in the face of such an attack. He had no room to retaliate. Clang! A loud sound rang out, and the two-handed sword flew high into the air. In the next second, the storm war halberd's cold blade pressed against Savoy's chest. Chapter 423. I've lost. The Marquis of Savoy was taken aback when he saw the gleaming blade in front of his chest. Whoosh! Sulen smiled and put away his storm halberd. Since the outcome has been decided, you should know what to do, Marquis. The Marquis of Savoy's face turned pale. After a while, he said, I'll keep my promise. He turned to leave. Wait a minute. Su Luen was the first to stop Marquis Savoy. Duke, do you want me to stay here? The Marquis of Savoy's expression changed. Sulen sneered when he heard the way the Marquis of Savoy addressed him. As expected, the Marquis of Savoy's wishful thinking. However, since Sulen dared to bet, he naturally had a way to make him keep his promise. Don't worry, Marquis. I just have something to give you. Su Luen smiled, and with a flip of his palm, he took out the self-created hero template from the storage space. The self-created hero template could turn an ordinary person into a hero, but it also had a powerful function. The user could never betray Sulen. What is it? The Marquis of Savoy asked curiously. This. Sulen quickly sent the self-created hero template into the Marquis of Savoy's body before he could react. The Marquis of Savoy, who was about to block, froze the moment the light ball entered his body. It took him a few seconds to recover. After the light ball entered the Marquis of Savoy's body, Sulen heard a system notification. Are you sure you want to use the self-created hero template? Yes. Template fusion. Fusion successful. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a new hero. Master, the Marquis of Savoy said respectfully after he recovered. Sulen had never believed in the so-called bet. He had planned to take the Marquis of Savoy as his subordinate from the beginning. A legendary warrior was a rare high-end combat force. Moreover, the Marquis of Savoy's family had influence in the north. He could not bear to lose such a top fighter. Name: Spencer Savoy. Loyalty: 100 locked. Race: human. Class: Knight level. Legendary strength: 31 agility. 20 spirit. 16 physique. 27 charm. 14 commander. 78 characteristics. Talents: legendary sturdy, legendary tenacity, agility, battle dodging, intermediate iron bones, battle reflex, calm, iron blood, overlord, flexibility, proficient in battle techniques, firm will, extended lifespan. Skills: cleave, heavy chop, whirlwind slash, cross sword technique, white raven sword technique, night battle, aristocratic etiquette, whirlwind slash, excels in defense, excels in weapon combat, excels in defense, excels in offense, excels in collision, quick movement, intimidate, trample weapon proficiency. Bow 120, javelin 125, sword 197, horsemanship 178, shield 150. The Marquis of Savoy's attributes weren't that outstanding. They were only above average. In fact, if it weren't for the existence of the health potion, he would never have broken through to the legendary rank. Sulen checked Marquis Savoy's information and said, "Announce that you recognize me as the king and swear your loyalty to me when you return." "Yes, master." Marquis Savoy said respectfully. Well, take your men back and wait for my call at any time. Su Luan said and mounted the horse and left. Marquis Savoy also left with his men after Su Len left. Over the next few days, something major happened in the Kingdom of Florence. One of the 4 electors, the most powerful noble family in the north, the House of Savoy, suddenly announced that they recognized Su Len as the king of the Kingdom of Florence and swore their loyalty to the king. This had a huge impact on the entire Kingdom of Florence. The nobles in the northern provinces who refused to recognize Su Len immediately became obedient after hearing the news. Some nobles even directly announced that they recognized Su Luan as the king of Florence, and those neutral, fence-sitting nobles who were originally in a wait-and-see state also expressed their recognition of Su Luan as the king after seeing this situation. With the support of the Marquis of Savoy, the entire north quickly settled down. Even the nobles who were still stubbornly refusing to recognize Su Len kept a low profile. However, Su Len was very vengeful. How could he let these guys go? He directly ordered the Marquis of Savoy to lead an army to eliminate the stubborn nobles. After receiving Sullen's order, the Marquis of Savoy immediately gathered an army to suppress the rebellion. After subduing the Marquis of Savoy, Su Len could finally free up his hands to deal with the restless nobles. It took a week for the construction of the barracks in San Filto City to be completed. Su Len began to let the original scattered soldiers re-enter the barracks in batches for training. On the other side, the female soldiers' camp also recruited 100 palace maids for training. There were 2 instructors for these female soldiers, a half-elf and a drow. Su Len did not intend to let these female soldiers fight head-on. Instead, he intended to let them guard the palace. After Sullen's strict orders, the sanitation of San Filto City was greatly improved. Although there was still a lot of garbage in some remote corners, the main roads had been cleaned up very neatly. The smell of human and animal excrement that could be smelled as soon as one entered the city had also been greatly reduced. Su Len recruited a large number of people to repair the main roads of the city. The originally muddy soil road began to be flattened by a large number of stone rollers. After the road was flattened, a layer of gravel began to be placed on it and continued to be rolled. In this way, the original soil road was replaced with a stone road. On both sides of the road, Su Len also asked the construction team to dig 2 drainage ditches. The drainage ditches were not large, only 50 centimeters wide and 60 centimeters deep. These drainage ditches extended along the road. The drainage ditches were covered with stone slabs, and there were some gaps where the slabs were connected. With the drainage ditches, even if it rained, there was no need to worry about waterlogging on the city's roads. In this era, waterlogging was common in the cities. Most of the time, when it rained, there would be water everywhere in the city. Although the drainage ditches could not completely eliminate waterlogging, most of the time waterlogging would not occur again. The amount of work required to flatten the road was huge. Su Len recruited a large number of workers from the slums. For a time, even the security of the slums improved a lot. Speaking of security, San Filto City's security was not good. It should be said that security was generally bad in this world. No matter which city it was, there were people who committed crimes. Underworld organizations, gang members, gray areas, officials, nobles, and so on. Not to mention the current world, even in Sullen's previous life, if the law was strictly enforced, a large number of people would go to jail or even eat peanuts. Corrupt, deceitful businessmen, black-hearted fake medicine, poisoned food, and so on. There were also all kinds of false advertisements on television stations. A group of people formed groups to cheat the elderly in the name of health consultations and safety lectures. There were even many people who used all kinds of methods to escape the punishment of the law. In Sullen's previous life, he heard a saying, "Justice may be late, but it will never be absent." However, this was not the original meaning of this saying. The original words of the judge were, "Justice will never be absent, it will only be late." The meaning was to criticize late justice and to express dissatisfaction with inefficient court trials. It meant that late justice was not true justice to everyone. But at some point in time, this sentence had been changed to this. The meaning was completely opposite, completely overturning the original idea, and instead praising the late justice. In his previous life, there was a rape case in the number 10 special family area. The person who discovered the corpse was sentenced to death and executed by firing squad for 23 years before his case was cleared. Meanwhile, the real murderer was arrested 9 years later and admitted to the crime. He waited until 23 years after the crime was committed before he was officially sentenced to death. Su Len was resolute in his crackdown on crime. Moreover, the laws in the Beifeng Principality were completely different from the laws in this world. The laws in this world were very similar to the laws in the Western world in his previous life. It was basically a sham. In front of the law, the nobles had special privileges. Apart from the nobles, the rich could also form a powerful group of lawyers. They had plenty of time and money to slowly drag it out with you. How could ordinary people drag it out with them? When they could not hold on any longer, they could only withdraw the lawsuit. In fact, these laws were completely to protect the interests of the privileged class. The laws in the Beifeng Principality were completely different. The most basic law in the Beifeng Principality was that those who committed a crime must be punished. For example, the most common reform through labor. This type of punishment was mainly used in cases where the degree of the crime was relatively small and did not cause much harm. Of course, there were many types of reform through labor, from cleaning the streets to transporting garbage to mining. In the Beifeng Principality's laws, there was no such thing as mediation. Those who violated the law had to be punished. If the crime was serious, they would be sent to mining and smashing stones. If the crime was light, they would be sent to clean the streets. All prisoners had to complete these jobs to earn living expenses during their time in prison. Otherwise, they could only starve. There was no need to talk about humanitarianism. When these prisoners committed crimes, why did they not talk about humanitarianism? If they talked about humanitarianism to criminals, then what about the victims? Moreover, in the Beifeng Principality's laws, the role of lawyers was reduced to the extreme. Basically, there were no serious crimes like robbery or murder. With a lawyer representing them, they could get a light sentence or even acquittal. The judicial officials in Sanfilto City could only amend the laws according to Su Len's wishes. At the same time, Su Len strengthened the training of the city guards. He had already planned to completely eliminate all kinds of gangs and illegal organizations in Sanfilto City, especially the slums. This would be the focus of the cleanup. Chapter 4:24. The slums were common in most cities in this world. Apart from being dirty and messy, they were also the hotbeds of evil and the darkest corners of the city. Murder, robbery, and smuggling were common occurrences here. Even the churches in the city rarely came here. People died here almost every day. Even the priests of the Dawnlight Shrine, who were known for their kindness, did not care about the lives of these people. However, things began to change with the arrival of the new king. The most obvious change was that many of the slums were hired to work. Although the work was hard, they could eat their fill and even get a salary. This gave many people hope to survive. Who would want to die if they could live? In an instant, these slum people burst out with a strong work enthusiasm and were grateful to Su Len, the king who brought them hope. However, the changes in the slums also made some people think differently. Boss, I've asked around. Those bumpkins earn about 10 copper nars a day. The women get 8 and even the children get 5. A skinny, wretched-looking man with a mustache said excitedly. I've done some calculations. There are more than 200 people in our gang's territory. If they are all adults, they can earn 2,000 copper nars a day, which is equivalent to 2 kinner. That's 60 kinner a month. That's not a small amount. A fierce-looking man with a scar on his face said with a hint of greed in his eyes, "Looks like our king is really rich." The scar-faced man took out a small knife and played with it. He then said, "Mouse, pass down the order. Everyone who goes to work must pay 80% of the safety fee when they return. I'll leave this to you. If anyone dares to hide it and refuse to pay, break one of their hands. Don't worry, I'll do it properly. I won't miss a single copper nar." The wretched-looking man with a mustache patted his chest and promised. After the health regulations were issued, Sanfilto City changed at a speed visible to the naked eye. The impact of the war had gradually faded, and the city became more prosperous than before. Knock, knock, knock. A series of knocks sounded. "Come in," Sulen said without raising his head. Sulen couldn't help but sniff at the fragrance. He looked up and said in surprise, "Phyllis, why are you here?" "I'm here to see you," Phyllis, who was wearing a court lady's dress, said with a lunchbox in her hand. "You'll be living here for the next 2 days. Although the country's affairs are important, you should also pay attention to your rest. This is the meat soup that I asked someone to prepare for you. Try it first." "All right." Smelling the tempting aroma, Sulen also felt his stomach turning. He picked up the broth and started to gulp it down. Phyllis chuckled and wiped the rice off the corner of his mouth with a handkerchief. "Don't drink so fast. No one's fighting with you. If it's not enough, there's more here." "That's enough." Sulen patted his belly and put down the bowl. "What have you been up to these days?" Phyllis asked as she put away the tableware. Sulen picked up the documents on the table and said, "Busy making laws." "Making laws? Are there any problems with the old laws?" Phyllis looked at Sulen in confusion. "Big problems." Sulen curled his lips and said, "The laws are too simple and crude. The punishment for crimes is also very low. Most of the time, it's impossible to uphold justice by following the laws. In addition to these laws are also very vague about taxation. For nobles and wealthy merchants, taxes are reduced or directly exempted. For commoners, there are more than 100 types of taxes, such as head tax, toll tax, goods tax, land tax, housing tax, city gate tax, salt tax, and so on. If the taxes are collected strictly according to the laws, it's not so bad. But I've checked the tax records over the years. The taxes are getting lower and lower year after year. It's obvious that the officials are colluding to embezzle the taxes. I've also asked someone to investigate the specific tax situation. It turns out that the tax collected by the state is 1 silver NAR, while the tax officials directly collect 1.5 or even 2 silver NARs. The taxes of civilians are increasing year after year, but the state's taxes are falling. In the end, the state doesn't collect enough taxes, but the civilians pay more. The state loses money, and so do the civilians. Only the nobles and the officials get rich. Sulen sneered and threw the documents on the table. Hearing Sulen's words, Phyllis was a bit anxious. "Then what should we do? Should we just arrest the tax officials and the nobles and force them to hand over the taxes? That can solve the problem, but it won't do much for the people at the bottom. If we arrest these people and replace them with others, the result will probably be the same as before," Sulen continued. "The better way is to improve the laws and strengthen the supervision of the officials and nobles. Then let's do as you say. I support you." Phyllis walked to Sulen and hugged him. Sulen gently stroked Phyllis's hair. "Don't worry, it will be better." Compared to North Wind Principality, the Kingdom of Florence had existed for hundreds of years. Although it had a larger population and a larger territory, it was much worse than North Wind Principality in all aspects. In terms of taxes, in North Town, no one dared to violate the rules set by Sulen, and no one dared to embezzle. There were many successful experiences in North Town, and the key ones were the prison built by Sulen and the twice-yearly ideological education. Officials at all levels had to go to the prison for ideological education every 6 months. Plus, there were all kinds of rules and supervisors in North Town. Basically, no one dared to cross the line. Even if someone wanted to do so, they would be caught very soon. Sulen gave officials the right to report. There was an office in the city hall that received reports, and they needed to report with their real names. Even normal civilians could report officials to the city hall. Of course, if the report was verified, the person who reported it would be rewarded, but if it was false, the person who reported it would also be severely punished. This kind of reporting was originally used to restrict officials. Sulen didn't want it to become a tool for someone to take revenge. This system had been running in North Town for more than a year, and it seemed to be working well. There was a prison in San Filto City, but it didn't have all kinds of bonuses like the prison in Northtown. Therefore, if Sulen wanted to follow Northtown's rules, he would have to build a new prison. Since he had decided to do it, the sooner the better. After Sulen marked out the location of the prison, he asked people to build it according to the blueprint he gave. The workers were still recruited from the slums. The slums had a lot of manpower and they were cheap. Ever since Sulen and Phyllis ascended to the throne, San Filto City had been constantly building. All kinds of construction projects provided a lot of jobs in San Filto City. With a job, there would naturally be income. With income, there would be consumption. This would promote the city's commerce, and the materials needed for various projects would be purchased from the market. Business activities would become more frequent, and the entire city would become prosperous. San Filto City was now more prosperous than it was before the war. Seeing such a prosperous scene, no one would have thought that this city had just gone through a war half a month ago. In order to better control San Filto City, Surin also contacted Hathaway through the communication magic array and asked her to transfer a group of grassroots officials from Beifeng Dukedom to San Filto City, as well as a group of tamed falcons from Beifeng City. The officer training school in Northtown City had never stopped. In the past, due to the lack of manpower, the first few batches of training lasted 1 month. Now, it had been extended to 6 months, and the number of people in each batch had increased to 100. The most recent batch of officials was about to finish their training, and they were all sent to San Filto City. Magic communication was expensive, so Sulen planned to build an eagle nest in San Filto City and use falcons to communicate. At the same time, to strengthen the connection with Northtown City, Sulen planned to build a teleportation circle. Of course, this teleportation circle could only be used for emergency communication. The teleportation circle cost a lot to build, and it required a lot of mana. The teleportation circle in Northtown City was powered by the elemental pool, but even so, it couldn't be used frequently. San Filto City was thousands of miles away from Northtown City, so the energy consumption was even higher. He also needed to build an elemental pool. Footsteps came from the corridor, and then there was a hurried knock on the door. "Come in." The door was pushed open, and a servant came in hurriedly. "Your Majesty, our workers in charge of the construction work were killed." Sulen suddenly looked up. "What did you say?" The servant quickly said, "A few workers we sent to build the infrastructure of the city were killed. Their bodies were decapitated and dumped near the city gate." "Who did it?" Sullen's voice was like the cold wind from the icy plains, freezing people. The servant gulped. "We suspect that it was done by the gangs in the slums." "Gangs? How dare they kill my people?" Sullen's face was cold, and his eyes were filled with anger. "I heard that it was because of the workers' salaries. Those workers didn't pay their salaries." Sullen's face turned even uglier. "No, that's not it. The workers' salaries weren't delayed. It was those gangsters who wanted to forcibly take away the workers' salaries. As a result, our staff went to reason with them." Chapter 425. "You mean those gangs in the slums wanted to rob the workers of their wages, and our men were killed when they tried to stop them?" Sulen listened to the whole story as he walked. "Are there any nobles involved in this matter? Are there any nobles behind those gangs?" "Sorry, Your Majesty, we haven't figured it out yet. Send people to continue the investigation. Now, bring some people to clean up the slums," Sulen said in a deep voice. "Yes, Your Majesty." The roads in the slums were still muddy. Mud and dirt would splash up when one stepped on them. Occasionally, there would be places where feces would be dumped. The air was always filled with a foul smell. Small shacks were built in a messy manner, and there were many skinny children with blue faces and ragged clothes on the streets. Rats scurried across the ground from time to time. Compared to the other parts of the city, this place was like a completely different world. Of course, in addition to those low and shabby shacks, there were also a few tall buildings in the slums. There were many strong men with scars around the buildings. Obviously, these places were the gangs in the slums. When Su Len arrived at the scene of the incident, it was already surrounded by people. A servant hurried to greet him. "Your Majesty!" The servant carefully carried a few stretchers over. After seeing the bodies on the stretchers, Su Len's face became even gloomier. He looked like a volcano that was about to erupt. The man on the stretcher was already dead. His back was a mess of flesh and blood. One could even see his white spine. His 4 limbs were broken. Someone had broken his limbs and whipped him to death. The attendant lifted the linen cloth from the other stretcher and saw that the other corpse was also covered with whip marks. There were more than 10 marks left behind by Luotai on the chest. The skin on the chest was almost completely burnt. There were also many signs of severe beating on the face. It was almost impossible to recognize the original appearance. There was a deep strangle mark on the neck, and the head was tilted to one side. The neck was fractured. The last body was also badly beaten. His legs and arms were broken. 7 of his 10 fingers were broken. His body was covered in blood. Many parts of his skin were torn off while he was still alive. His teeth were also broken. It was not hard to imagine how much pain these 3 people had suffered before they died. Su Len's face became gloomier. He was emitting a cold, murderous intent. Even the servants around him could not help but shiver. They quietly moved back a few steps. As soldiers who had followed Su Len since he was in the North Town, they rarely saw Su Len with such an expression. However, every time they saw him, it was bound to be bloody. "Aten." Su Len's cold voice was like a bone-chilling wind. "Yes, Your Majesty." The drow bowed and took a step forward. "Take your men and capture all the people involved. Remember, I want them alive." Su Len looked at the drow in front of him and said, "Your Majesty, we promise to complete the task." Aten immediately said loudly. Su Len nodded. "Very good. Your skills are not rusty, right? Try it on all of them." Hearing Su Len's words, the servants around him could not help but shiver. In terms of the skills of torture, the drows could be ranked in the top 3 on the continent. Although these drows in the North Town were all believers of the Dark Maiden, their skills were not weak at all. The 3 staff members had obviously experienced very cruel torture and were brutally killed after the torture. Since Su Len ascended the throne, he had become the master of San Felto City. Now, someone actually treated his people like this in his territory. This was no different from slapping Su Len in the face. These 3 staff members were managers recruited to transform the city. They led the workers to transform the city and represented the work of the city hall. Now that they were tortured and killed, how could Su Len not be angry? After Aten left with his men, Su Len turned around with a strong murderous intent. On the surface, it was just the killing of 3 staff members, which was not a big deal. However, for Su Len and the new city hall of San Felto City, it was a blatant humiliation. This was a very serious blow to the prestige of Su Len and the city hall in the eyes of ordinary civilians. Su Len was the king of the Kingdom of Florence, and San Felto was the capital of the kingdom. In the capital, his staff members were cruelly killed and abandoned near the city gate. What would the civilians in the city think if they saw this? They would think that as the king, Su Len could not even protect his own people in the capital. Who would dare to follow Su Len in the future? This was a serious provocation to Su Len's dignity. He had to use 10 times more cruel means to exact revenge. Everyone involved in this matter had to pay the price in blood. "Hansen, your subordinate is here." The barbarian next to him stepped forward and saluted. "Take your men and occupy the entire slum area. Kill anyone who dares to resist." Su Len said with a murderous look. "Blood could only be washed away with blood." "Kane, your subordinate is here. Take people and lock down the noble area. Don't let anyone in or out." "Yes, Your Majesty." Su Len did not believe that these gangs in the city had no connection with the nobles in the city. It could be said that without the support of the nobles, these gangs would not be able to develop at all. Most of the time, the gangs in the city were the dogs of the nobles. They helped the nobles deal with things that they could not do in public. These gangs did a lot of illegal things in private. Without the support of the nobles, they would have been dealt with. Su Lun didn't have time to deal with these gangs before. After all, these gangs were in the slums. As long as they didn't come out to make trouble, Su Lun planned to let them live for a while. When he had time to deal with them, he would deal with them. Unexpectedly, these gangs took action first. As the king of the Kingdom of Florence, if these gangs dared to despise him, then the nobles in the kingdom would not respect him. By then, the whole Kingdom of Florence would be full of rebellions. After the order was issued, Hansen smiled ferociously, then led his barbarians and army directly into the slum area. Hansen's army was more than 5,000 people. Each barbarian warrior led an army of 100 people. These barbarian warriors were fully armored and wielding giant axes. The gangs that were originally tyrannical in the city were not much stronger than chickens in front of them. On the other side, Aten and the Drows were also constantly advancing. Their goal was the culprit of this incident. Just after the incident, they investigated immediately and had already figured out the lairs of the gangs. Now, they had to capture all of these people. Cain led other people to seal off the noble district. All the nobles were asked to return to their own residences. Seeing this situation, many nobles did not know what was going on at all. At the same time, some nobles were very flustered. The slum area, the Black Dog Gang. This was a 3-story building. Compared to the surrounding shacks, it was like a crane in a flock of chickens. At this time, there was a sound of fighting in this house. Damn it! Run, those people are coming. Monsters! They are all monsters. Bang! A loud noise came, and one of the walls of the house was directly knocked down. A barbarian in heavy armor and holding a giant axe rushed in. As soon as he entered, he waved his giant axe and directly cut 2 gang members around him into 2 pieces. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Several gang members were so scared that they turned around and ran. The barbarian rampaged. Wherever he went, there was no enemy. Although these gang members were much stronger than ordinary people compared to the barbarian, they were a group of weak chickens. Dealing with them was like chopping melons and vegetables. Only a few of the leader's strength had reached the level of beginner or intermediate professions. As the army entered, the slum area was cleaned up bit by bit. The ordinary poor were hit and isolated. This time, Su Lun was ready to completely clean up the slum area. But the ordinary people living here could not be ignored. These people would be temporarily placed in concentration camps. The next city construction would employ all of these poor people. Of course, before that, they still needed to catch the gang members hiding in the slum area. For the gang members who resisted, Sullen's order was to directly behead them. As for those who surrendered, they would be investigated and then dealt with according to the law. Those who had committed serious crimes would be directly killed. The rest would be assigned to various places according to their crimes until the end of their sentence. The slum area was not small. After cleaning it up, Su Lun would completely demolish the slum area. Some of it would be rebuilt with new houses, and other areas would be built with markets, warehouses, and so on. Su Lun built 4 concentration camps outside the city. Each concentration camp could accommodate 20,000 people, which was enough to accommodate all the poor. As the army continued to advance, more and more poor people were sent to the concentration camps. Aten had also completed the task given by Su Lun. The murderers of the 3 staff members, as well as the entire gang, were all brought over. At this time, these people's limbs were broken, their 10 fingers were dripping with blood, and there were all kinds of wounds all over their bodies. All the punishments of the 3 dead had been given to these people. Moreover, in addition to these punishments, the Drows also used their torture skills. Now, these people were only left with one breath. "Your Majesty, they've been interrogated," Aten said respectfully. Su Lun did not look back. He asked directly, "Who's behind them?" "The Grizzly Bear Gang is backed by Viscount Matt. But this time, there's another secret." "What secret?" "When we interrogated them again, we found out that a wizard had unknowingly cast a suggestion spell on them. But that wizard is very cautious. These people have never seen him before." "I know." Sullen's eyes were even colder. Chapter 426. Who else knows about the wizards? Sulen asked. Your Majesty, I've only told you about this, Aten said respectfully. Sulen nodded. That's good. Pretend you don't know anything about this. Go and arrest the noble behind the grizzly bear gang. Yes, Your Majesty. Aten bowed and left. Sulen didn't go after the wizard who was hiding behind the scenes. After all, wizards had too many ways to hide themselves. Sulen didn't have any wizards under his command in San Felto City, so it wouldn't be easy to find the wizard. However, it wasn't impossible. He could just ask Hathaway to come and do it. The wizard was so secretive that he couldn't be a legendary. Hathaway could use a prophecy spell to find him. Although prophecies weren't very reliable most of the time, they were still very effective when used on people who were weaker than the caster. The slums were very large. It took a whole day to move all the poor people out. They were all placed in 4 concentration camps. Although they were concentration camps, they didn't lack any living materials. Of course, if they wanted to enjoy these things, they had to work. Sulen wouldn't feed them for free. Other than these poor people, all the gangs in the slums were wiped out, including the noble who was involved with the grizzly bear gang. As for the crimes, there were too many. If they were to count, more than half of the nobles in this world would be arrested. The gangs in the slums were wiped out. Other than the kidnappers who resisted and were killed, those who surrendered basically survived. These surviving gang members had to go through a round of screening. Among them, those who committed the most heinous crimes and angered the public were directly sentenced to death. Then, they were sent to the shooting range for the new recruits to train their courage by seeing blood. It was the first time for many of the recruits to kill someone, so they were hesitant when they made their move. Some of the gang members were slashed more than a dozen times but still didn't die. The scene was extremely miserable. It was an extravagant hope to have a quick death here. Those who committed lesser crimes were sentenced to life imprisonment. In Sulen's law, life imprisonment was not like the law in his previous life, where they were sentenced to prison for committing a crime. After that, the state would have to fork out a portion of the tax revenue to support these people. They would be able to eat their fill, wear warm clothes, and receive free medical treatment when they fell sick. In the end, the state would have to waste police resources to keep an eye on them. To the outside world, it was said that this was the spirit of humanitarianism and that criminals also had human rights. That would not work in Sulen. The laws written by his organization did not have such treatment. Those who committed serious crimes but did not deserve death were directly thrown into the mines. They would only be given food and daily necessities after mining a sufficient amount of ores every day. Those who did not work were just waiting for death. Human rights? Unfortunately, criminals had no human rights. Sulen had always felt that emphasizing human rights for criminals was completely condoning their crimes. You treat criminals as human rights, but what about the human rights of the victims? The victims did not break the law, but who cared about their human rights? In Sulen's previous life, he often saw reports of drunk driving car accidents on the news. The perpetrators would even threaten the victims to accept an apology by not paying compensation and issue a letter of understanding. High medical expenses could bring down a family. Many people succumbed like this, and then the perpetrators would be given a lighter punishment. In Sulen's eyes, this was simply ironic. One should not persuade others to do good without experiencing their pain. The number of gang members caught in the slums exceeded 3,000. Half of these people were convicted of serious crimes, such as crimes against the law, human trafficking, robbery, and murder. After confirmation, all of them were sentenced to death. The rest, except for some minor crimes, were thrown out to clean the streets and toilets, and the rest were all sent to the mines. At the same time, Sulen also found a lot of dirt on the aristocrats from these gang members. These gangs were inextricably linked to the aristocrats. Otherwise, how could these gangs survive? In the aristocratic district, in a luxurious aristocratic manner. Bang! An exquisite antique vase that had been passed down from the previous era was slammed to the ground. Then, an angry roar was heard, and the whole room seemed to tremble slightly. In the room, a middle-aged man with a strong body was angrily smashing things. Then, He grabbed the collar of the leader of the few people standing in front of him and roared, "Idiots! Bastards! Are you looking for death? Who told them to do it? Why didn't you stop those idiots? I really want to pry open your heads and see if it's filled with dog sh*t. You bunch of swine beasts. Don't you know what time it is now? That person has just ascended to the throne by force and is in a hurry to take care of us. Do you want to die faster? Are you rushing to hand him a knife? What do we do now? The outside has been blocked by his people. We can't escape now." The group of people standing in the hall broke out in cold sweat. One of the men who looked strong hesitated and whispered, "Your Excellency, this was done by the Grizzly Bear Gang. It has nothing to do with us." Bang! The strong man directly grabbed a lampstand and smashed it over. The man's head was full of blood, but he did not dare to dodge. "Are you a pig?" He was furious and roared loudly. He has now surrounded the slums. Do you think it's just to deal with the Grizzly Bear Gang? If he's determined to kill us, none of us can escape. You, Viscount Ron, the Blackfeather Bandits are your people, right? Over the years, at least 20 caravans have died in their hands. Those stolen goods were all sold in the slums. And you, Baron Taros, you've taken tens of thousands of kinner every year from San Filto's gray income, right? I heard that you recently robbed a merchant and killed all of them. And you. How many of you have shit on your butts? How many people in your family have never been stained with blood? Which family of yours doesn't have a representative in the slums? If he really pursues the matter, none of you can escape." A middle-aged man dressed as a noble next to him hesitated for a moment. Then his expression turned cold. He said in a deep voice, "Should we strike first?" As he spoke, his right hand slammed down. Bang! The strong man grabbed the clothes rack next to him and smashed it, roaring, "Idiot! Who do you think he is? A pig at the mercy of others? He killed a legendary devil the first time he entered the city. Who among the nobles in our city has the strength to do this? Can you invite a legendary powerhouse to take action? You should have seen his army. That group of troops alone can easily kill all of us. What do we do now?" Another well-dressed noble had an ugly look on his face as he slowly said, "Speaking of which, none of us are clean. He's not really planning to kill all of us nobles, is he? How dare he? Why wouldn't he dare?" The strong middle-aged man sneered. "Look at what he's done before. It hasn't even been a month since he ascended the throne. How many nobles in San Filto City have died? If the detection spell of this world was cast on all the nobles, then it was estimated that more than half of the nobles belonged to the lawful evil camp. The ruling class had no lack of lawful evil. In their eyes, there was no good or evil, only all kinds of benefits. This group of people was the easiest to fall into depravity. This was also why Sullen's pleasure devil targeted this city when he came here last time. There were too many depraved souls here. To the devils, those depraved souls were their best resources. Most of the time, the more prosperous a city was, the darker the other side. Hand over those gangs, stop all the gray channels, the slave trade, the black market, and the organizations that are no longer there. At the same time, support all of His Majesty's policies unconditionally. Prepare the money, food, and manpower. If we want to survive this crisis, we can only rely on him. I don't think His Majesty is crazy enough to want to wipe out all the nobles." Sulen indeed didn't plan to wipe out all the nobles. If he did, more than half of the nobles in the Kingdom of Florence would rebel, even those who had declared their support for him to become the king. This time, Sulen planned to wipe out the nobles who had gone too far and warn the others. If he really wiped out all the nobles, then the entire Kingdom of Florence could only be wiped out city by city. Governing a city wasn't an easy task. Sulen wasn't a noble family with hundreds of years of history. He couldn't easily find a large number of managers to help him manage the city. Most of the time, he could only rely on nobles. After all, more than 95% of the human population was illiterate. It was difficult to find enough managers. Of course, Sulen had been cultivating talents for a long time. This time, he had wiped out all the gangs. In fact, it was a warning to the nobles. As he expected, after he wiped out all the gangs in the slums, many nobles began to express their goodwill to Su Lin in various ways. These nobles began to actively cooperate with Sulin's orders. The efficiency of San Filto City also increased rapidly. After clearing out the slums, the next day, the buildings in the slums began to be demolished. Su Lin had already made a plan for this area. In his previous life, real estate development was the most profitable business. The area of the slums was very large, and the bad areas would be built into houses for the poor to live in. The areas with convenient transportation would be transformed into markets. Chapter 427. After the cleanup, San Filto City quickly regained its prosperity. After the gangs were gone, the trading and living conditions were greatly improved. The city's sanitation reform was still ongoing, and the pace was significantly faster. It wasn't a good idea to keep tens of thousands of poor people in a concentration camp. If they didn't find something to do, there would definitely be trouble. Therefore, Su Lin began to take out the basic reconstruction of San Filto City. Su Lin knew the method of providing relief through work, which was very suitable for these poor people who had nothing. Public toilets and bathrooms were also built, and the streets were turned into cobblestones. The poor people would be paid for their work every day, and they would be able to eat their fill. To them, this was already very blissful. Many new houses would be built in the original slums, and these houses would be sold to the poor at a lower price. The building materials needed could be gathered by the poor people. The poor people would still be used to build the houses, and after the houses were built, they would be sold to the poor people. In this way, the money Su Lin distributed to the poor people was once again recovered. Could be said that Su Lin didn't spend any money and even made a small profit. He only paid a small price to complete the basic reconstruction of the city. After Marquis Savoy left San Filto City, he led the army back to Cult City. After he announced his loyalty to Su Lin, the neutral nobles in the northern provinces of the Kingdom of Florence began to support Su Lin. However, there were still a few cities that didn't accept Su Lin. These cities were located in the northwest of the Kingdom of Florence. They were already at the border of the Kingdom of Florence. On the other side, they were connected to the Kingdom of Lorenza. The road to these nobles' territories wasn't easy. They had to pass through a mountain range. Because of the mountain range, it was much more difficult to conquer these territories. After 3 days of rest, Su Lin ordered Marquis Savoy to lead the army to wipe out these territories. Under the leadership of the legendary knight, the morale of Cult's army soared. None of the rebellious nobles had legendary combat power. As long as Marquis Savoy arrived, it was only a matter of time before the rebellious nobles were dealt with. Su Lin had someone send some falcons to the Marquis of Savoy so that he could use them to communicate. If anything unexpected happened, he could be notified immediately. When the Marquis of Savoy went to eliminate the rebellion, the first batch of officials and soldiers from the Northwind Dukedom arrived at San Filto. As soon as these officials arrived, they immediately immersed themselves in their work. Su Lin was finally freed from his busy work. After Su Lin reviewed the new law, it was passed and officially implemented. Of course, there were many imperfections in the law written in such a short period of time. However, it could be amended slowly as it was used. In addition to the most basic constitution, Su Lin also established several branches such as criminal law, commercial law, and civil law. Because of the reinforcements from the Northwind Dukedom, Su Lin also began to reform the tax system. In the past, he didn't change it because of the lack of manpower. Su Lin didn't trust the previous tax officials in San Filto. If the new tax system allowed them to collect taxes, there would definitely be many problems in the end. Before he had people he could trust, Su Lin wouldn't reform the tax system. This time, the biggest change in the tax system was that the nobles were included in the list of taxpayers. In the past, the nobles didn't pay taxes. Not only did they not pay taxes, but their caravans and shops also didn't pay taxes. Su Lin wanted to teach them one thing. In this world, birth, death, and taxes were unavoidable. The nobles enjoyed many privileges. If their taxes were abolished, there wouldn't be much money left in the national treasury. After the officials from the Northwind Dukedom arrived, Su Len sped up the construction of the prison. He planned to let the officials experience the prison after it was completed. With the prison, the corruption and dereliction of duty of the officials could be guaranteed. "What's this?" Phyllis asked, pointing at the drawing on the table by Su Len. "Water pipe design." Su Len didn't even raise his head. He focused on the drawing in his hand. "What water pipe design?" "Water pipe design," Su Len repeated. After getting used to the convenient water in the Northwind Dukedom, Su Len felt very uncomfortable after coming to San Filto. "What's this for?" Phyllis asked curiously. Su Len put down the quill and poured himself a cup of tea. "This is the water supply system of the Northwind Dukedom. You've seen it in the Northwind Dukedom. Do you want a cup? I added ice, lemon juice, and sugar. Tastes good." "No need." Phyllis waved her hand. She didn't like the bitter taste of tea. She preferred milk. "I asked someone to bring you today's lunch. Try it and see if you like it." As she spoke, Phyllis took out the fragrant food from the lunchbox. The lunch was very sumptuous. There were grilled fish, steak, lamb chops, vegetable salad, fruit platter, and so on. Phyllis and Su Len enjoyed the lunch together. After the sanitary pads in San Filto were improved, Su Len began to try to improve the living standards of the city. First of all, the water system could greatly improve the happiness of the residents. In addition, the public bathhouse built by Su Len also needed the water system. Otherwise, it would take a lot of time to transport water to all the public bathhouses in the city. There were many benefits to using tap water. Commoners in this world usually went to the river or the well to draw water. Then, they would store a tank of water at a time and use it slowly. Because the tank was rarely cleaned, most of the time the water in the tank was not very clean. If you looked carefully, you would find a layer of green caterpillar-like things floating in the water tank. In fact, those were algae. Sullen's water supply system this time was a water tower. This method was much less work than the overhead aqueduct. The water from the river outside the city was pumped to the water tower, and then the water was sent to every house through the pipes. Of course, the power problem was solved with spells. In fact, there were many spells that could be used to replace the pump. The simplest one was to use a whirlwind to draw water from the river. This required a simple rune magic circle and an energy crystal to drive it. As long as the energy crystal was replaced in time, the system could be used continuously. Water pipes were either made of iron or copper. Iron pipes had to be treated with anti-rust treatment, or they would be scrapped in a few years. Copper pipes were good, but they were currency. Su Len was worried that someone would steal them and make them into currency. As for silver, there was no need to mention it. However, in this world with magic, this kind of thing was easy to solve. It was not too difficult to just add some anti-rust treatment to iron pipes. There were many ways for wizards to do this. In this way, it would be much easier to build a water system. As for the power source, Su Len planned to use the element pool to replace it. The second problem was the lighting of the palace. Although there were magic lamps in this era, they were rarely used in other places except for the wizard tower. Even the palace used candles. Su Len planned to install magic lamps in all the palaces. The cost of magic lamps was not high. The main problem was the power source. However, since Su Len planned to build the element pool, the power source problem was solved. "You drew a tower?" Phyllis sat on Sullen's lap. A pleasant smell enveloped the tip of her nose. "Yes, this is a water tower. It is used to store, purify, and filter water. The water in this tower is sent to thousands of households through pipes." "This is different from the one in Northern Town?" Phyllis asked curiously. "The one in Northern Town uses an elevated aqueduct. This one requires magic," Su Len explained. "Then what is this drawing?" Phyllis asked, pointing at another drawing. "This is a blast furnace used to make iron." Su Len pointed at the drawing and said, "This one is hollow. It is used to store fuel and ores. I improved it by combining the dwarves' blast furnace technology." Su Len had seen the blast furnace made by the dwarves in the underground world. To be honest, the blast furnace made by the dwarves was almost the same as a blast furnace except for the smaller capacity and lower temperature. If not for the lack of better materials, the dwarves would have built a bigger blast furnace. However, this was not a problem for Su Lin. The dwarves did not have good refractory materials, but the wizards did. The new blast furnace was nearly 8 meters tall and could produce 2 tons of iron at a time. The furnace body was in the shape of a tower, with an inner diameter of 3 meters. To prevent it from collapsing, there was a supporting frame at the bottom. The walls of the furnace were thin at the top and thick at the bottom. The belly of the furnace was half a meter thick. The innermost layer was made of Saraya's fire-resistant bricks, and there was a circle of air supply. The air was pumped into the belly of the furnace by manual blowers or hydraulic blowers. In addition to this blast furnace, Su Lin also made a feeder, which was a climbing rail and a movable feeder at the bottom. The feeder would climb to the top of the furnace under the traction of manual blowers or hydraulic blowers. The buckle at the bottom of the feeder would be put in by a hook, which would open the outlet and pour fuel or ores into the furnace. In fact, this thing had been in the dwarves' hands for a long time. Su Lin just made some simple modifications and moved it here. The method used to make iron in San Felto City was relatively backward. With this blast furnace, the production efficiency had increased several times. As long as a few blast furnaces were built according to the drawing, the production of pig iron in San Felto City would increase exponentially. Su Lin was planning to expand his army, so he needed a large amount of iron to make equipment. In addition to this blast furnace, Su Lin also planned to build a blacksmith workshop to produce equipment in a better way. Chapter 428. In this era, the percentage of soldiers equipped with armor was very low, around 50%. The percentage of regular soldiers could reach 120%, and the percentage of auxiliary soldiers was around 20%. Soldiers in this era were required to prepare their own weapons and rations on the battlefield. The auxiliary soldiers were usually farmers. If there was a war between two noble lands, it would usually be a knight leading a dozen squires against an army of farmers. Sulin's army was not like that. The regular soldiers of the Kingdom of Florence were equipped with leather armor and iron scale armor. Iron armor could only be worn by a platoon leader. The main reason was that the production cost of iron armor was very high. The Kingdom of Florence did not have a hydraulic forge like the one in Northtown, nor a blast furnace, so the production of pig iron was limited. A full set of iron armor was not cheap either. Su Lin planned to build a blast furnace and a hydraulic forge here to mass-produce iron armor. While Su Lin was planning to build a blast furnace, the prison in San Felto City was completed. The prison was built from a castle. It looked solemn on the outside. All the windows were only the size of a palm and were sealed with iron pillars as thick as a finger. On the high wall outside the prison, there was a sharp iron fence. Just by looking at it from the outside, one could feel the security was tight. The prison had around 80 rooms, and it was sturdy and durable. After the prison was completed, Su Lin came here in a hurry. He planned to bring some officials here for some ideological education. Prison. A prison built from a castle. Any criminal will be severely punished here. Eerie Terror plus 33, Indestructible plus 30, Abrupt Repentance plus 28, Mind Interrogation plus 33, Strength Suppression plus 35, Imprisonment plus 33, Spirit Modification plus 30, Surrender plus 35, City Security plus 20, People's Sentiment plus 15, Prosperity minus 3. This is the prison we built? Blacksmith, who was standing not far away, gulped as he looked at the building that gave him goosebumps. Looks good, Su Lin said as he looked at the prison. Where are the officials? Are they here? Your Majesty, I've sent someone to inform them. I believe they will be here soon, a guard beside him said respectfully. Around 10 minutes later, a group of officials arrived outside the prison under the guard's lead. Your Majesty! Although they were a little confused when they were suddenly called here, the group of officials did not show any dissatisfaction. Su Lin nodded and walked up to the officials. Many people are wondering why I called everyone here. What's so interesting about this prison? We're not criminals. Indeed, you are not criminals, but you are officials. An ordinary person's crime may only affect him or a limited number of people, but you are different. As officials, one of your decisions will affect thousands of people, so I have high requirements for officials. The reason I brought you here is to let you see what kind of punishment you will receive if you bend the law for favoritism, dereliction of duty, corruption, and knowingly break the law. It will serve as a warning to you. As soon as Su Len finished speaking, there was a commotion among the officials below. These officials were all former officials of San Filto City. According to the conduct of the nobles, one could imagine how professional these people were. Even if they were all wiped out, Su Len wouldn't be surprised. Quiet. Seeing the chaotic crowd, Su Len said in a deep voice, I don't care about what you did before I came to San Filto City. I wasn't the king at that time, so it wasn't under my control. But after that, you'd better make up for what you did. If you don't listen to me, don't blame me for not reminding you. All right, now all of you follow me into this prison. Take a good look at the consequences of doing wrong. After that, Su Len led the jailers and the unwilling officials into this gloomy and terrifying prison. As soon as they entered the prison, they felt a gloomy and cold atmosphere. The entire prison environment was very depressing. The light was dim, and just the corridor made people feel a sense of trepidation. The officials' behavior was even more unbearable. Different from the prison in Northern Town City, there were a lot of torture devices in this prison. These torture devices seemed to have been used before. There was a lot of dark red stuff on them that looked like fresh blood. A few jailers on the side gave a detailed explanation of these torture devices. They even took out a few pieces of pork to demonstrate. When they saw the pieces of pork being tortured by various torture devices, the officials' faces turned pale. Their limbs went soft, and they couldn't even stand properly. Su Len waved his hand. Two jailers went forward and lifted up the officials whose legs went soft. Who knew that as soon as they lifted them up, the officials started to struggle and cry violently. Your Majesty, please spare my life. I know I was wrong. Please spare my life. One of the officials thought that the jailers were going to torture him. He was so scared that his face changed drastically. He cried crazily, Don't come over. Don't come over. Your Majesty, I confess. I surrender. I took bribes from others and worked for them. Your Majesty, please spare my life. For a moment, the entire prison was filled with cries and shouts. Su Len was also shocked by the scene in front of him. He didn't expect the prison to be so effective. He had only seen half of it, and the officials in front of him couldn't take it anymore. Seeing these officials begging for mercy, Su Len was very pleased. Since these people were willing to surrender, Su Len had no reason to refuse. He directly asked someone to record their crimes. Of course, before the records were recorded, all the officials had to walk through the entire prison. Of course, those officials who were so scared that their legs went soft were also forced to walk through the prison by the jailers. After going through such a baptism, the officials became very honest. They recounted all the crimes that they had committed in detail. For these people, those who had committed less serious crimes would continue to be promoted. Of course, they would have to make up for all their previous crimes. They would have to double the amount of money that they had accepted and correct their violations. For those who had committed more serious crimes, they would be removed from their positions after the collection of the stolen goods. Seeing that the prison was so effective, Su Len was relieved. Then, he made a rule that all the officials in San Filto City had to come to the prison once every 6 months for ideological education. The officials from Northern City were very familiar with this rule. As for the officials from San Filto City who had just visited the prison, they didn't dare to have any objections. They were afraid that Su Len would throw them into the prison. It was also from this day onwards that the prison in San Filto City became a sword that hung over the heads of all the officials. Because of this, the prison also became a terrifying place in San Filto City that could stop children from crying. With the prison, the efficiency of the officials in San Filto City doubled. All the excuses in the past disappeared. The operation of the city hall became very smooth. All the government decrees issued by Su Len were implemented seriously. It was no longer as superficial as before. Su Len was very satisfied with this change. The most direct manifestation was that the tax revenue had increased by half. The number of people in San Filto City had also increased from 60% to 75%. It was also from now on that Su Len truly controlled San Filto City. Another thing that was worth being happy about was the furnace in the blacksmith workshop. After some construction, the furnace was finally completed. Speaking of which, the technical level of the blast furnace designed by Su Luen had only reached the level of the earthen kiln in the 1960s of his previous life. It was impossible to make steel, but it was possible to make pig iron. The furnace in the blacksmith workshop was erected in the backyard. The furnace was made of refractory bricks and was cylindrical in shape. However, the two ends were slightly thinner. The furnace in front of him was 6 meters tall. It wasn't built according to the blueprint of 8 meters tall. The main reason was that the workers weren't skilled enough. However, a 6-meter tall furnace wasn't small. This furnace was filled with ores and dyes, could produce thousands of pounds of pig iron in one steelmaking. In order to make the blast furnace stronger, Su Luen specially blessed the blast furnace with hardening. The refractory bricks on the blast furnace were also blessed with fire resistance by Su Luen, which could reduce the burning of the blast furnace by flames. At the same time, Su Len drew runes on the inner wall of the furnace to increase the temperature of the flames. This could increase the temperature of the flames and melt the ores faster. To put it bluntly, the whole blast furnace was a magic item. A mine cart was used to feed the furnace. It was directly transported through the rails. The rails were connected to the furnace's inlet. The whole design used a pulley block to reduce the strength. There was also a large bellows next to the furnace. It was used to ventilate the furnace and transport oxygen. When the air was transported, there was also a heating device to preheat the air. This way, cold air wouldn't enter the furnace and lower the temperature. With this preheating device, the furnace's temperature could be directly raised by 200 degrees. The furnace was about the same height as the walls of the blacksmith workshop. In order to prevent earthquake collapse, Su Len also installed fixed parts around the furnace to make it more stable. After the furnace was built, it was natural to try it out first. The workers around couldn't wait to try it out. Under Sullen's order, the workers immediately pushed the prepared iron into the furnace and then ignited the charcoal. The orange flame rose instantly, and the surrounding temperature began to rise rapidly. Originally, the charcoal could only be heated to 800 or 900 degrees. However, after using the furnace, the temperature would be further increased. In addition, Su Len also drew runes to increase the temperature of the flames and preheated the air. Finally, the temperature in the furnace directly broke through to 1,600 degrees. Such a high temperature could completely melt the iron ore. Chapter 429. The properties of the blast furnace were pretty good. The ores were completely melted after a dozen hours of calcination. Next, the gate under the blast furnace was opened, and viscous molten iron slowly flowed out of the blast furnace. After the molten iron was stirred and cooled, it would become pig iron. If one wanted to refine pig iron into mature iron, they would have to add limestone and other materials during the calcining process to remove the impurities. However, these human craftsmen relied on their own experience to refine iron. Su Len didn't learn how to refine iron in his previous life, so his knowledge of metal refining was limited. He could only let the craftsmen slowly study it. However, although they couldn't directly refine iron or steel in the blast furnace, they could still refine iron or steel. But with the hydraulic forging machine, they could use forging to refine steel. With the help of these machines, the production of weapons and equipment was several dozen times faster than before. It wouldn't be long before the soldiers of San Filto City had enough equipment to use. Northern Wasteland, Northtown City. It had been nearly 2 months since Su Len left Northtown City for San Filto City. After such a long time, the Martyr's Palace in Northtown City was finally about to be completed. This wonder building was a set with the Arc de Triomphe and also required battle soul stones. The final step required Su Lin to complete it himself. After receiving the report from the city hall, Hathaway used the communication array to contact Su Lin in the distant San Felto city. After learning that the Martyr's Palace was completed, Su Lin gave some instructions to Phyllis and used a teleportation spell to return to Northtown City. Because he had the coordinates of Northtown City, the difficulty of long-distance teleportation was reduced a lot. The only problem was that it consumed a lot of energy. After leaving the coordinates in San Felto City, Su Lin used a teleportation spell to return to Northtown City. A magic light rose and Sullen's figure appeared in Northtown City in the next second. After leaving for 2 months, Northtown City had already entered winter. The weather had started to turn cold, but the city was still very lively. Northtown City had become even more prosperous in the 2 months since he left. Just as Su Lin appeared in the Lord's castle, there was a flash of light. Hathaway's figure appeared, followed by the little succubus Chris and Alex. "Your Majesty, you still remember to come back." Seeing Su Lin appear, Hathaway rolled her eyes and said. Su Lin smiled awkwardly. He was indeed in the wrong for not coming back for 2 months, so he could imagine that tonight would definitely be a sleepless night. "I've just obtained the Kingdom of Florence. I'm tied up with worldly affairs and can't leave, but I'm preparing to build a teleportation circle in San Felto City. I can come back at any time and you can go there at any time." Hathaway rolled her eyes and said, "I still have a lot of experiments to do. I don't have time to go to San Felto." "I don't have time either. I've been managing Northtown City and the underground world all this time. I don't have time to go." Chris glanced at Su Lin and said grumpily, "Don't look at me. If I agree, I'll be a traitor." Alex crossed his arms in front of his chest. His already majestic chest looked even fuller. "Don't." Sullen's figure flashed, and he directly pulled the 3 of them to the living room. "Staying in San Felto City is only temporary. Northtown City is my base. I know this very well, but I'm staying there for a while to stabilize the Kingdom of Florence. Once the kingdom is stabilized, Northtown City will be the new capital." Su Lin explained. After some explanation, Su Lin finally coaxed the girls and promised them that he would come back for 1 day every 3 days. Only then did the 3 girls reluctantly agree. Northtown City, Central Plaza. A majestic palace stood on the east side of the plaza, only 50 meters away from the majestic Triumphal Arch. The entire building was made of marble and was 36 meters tall. It was as tall as the Triumphal Arch next to it. This was the marvelous Martyr's Palace. There were many murals and statues carved on the outside of the Martyr's Palace. The content of the murals was basically the story of Sullen's expeditions. The carvings were of high quality and could be considered works of art. When Su Lin arrived at the palace, it was in a sealed state. Su Lin pushed open the doors and entered the hall. The decorations inside the Martyr's Palace weren't inferior to the outside at all. The reliefs, murals, and statues were all very beautiful. Su Lin went to the center of the Martyr's Palace. There was a tall platform here. He went up to the platform and took out 2 battle soul stones from his storage space. As soon as the battle soul stones appeared, he seemed to hear the clashing of spears and armored horses. He carefully placed the 2 battle soul stones in the gap of the platform. With a flash of light, a powerful energy instantly rose from the altar and quickly enveloped the entire Martyr's Palace. The heroic souls of soldiers slowly appeared in the Martyr's Palace. A faint hymn also sounded in his ears. This was the singing of the legendary angels. At the same time the Martyr's Palace was activated, the Triumphal Arch not far away also emitted a powerful energy. The 2 energies slowly fused together. The projections of heroic souls appeared in the sky above Northtown City one after another. The entire city was in high spirits. Ding! Congratulations, host! You have successfully constructed the Martyr's Palace. A triumphal arch has been detected in the surroundings. The Martyr's Palace and the Triumphal Arch have combined. Martyr's Palace. a sacred palace made of marble and battle soul stones to consecrate heroic spirits and war souls. Majestic atmosphere +35, indestructible +40, war soul everlasting +35, martial spirit +38, soul nurturing +25, heroic spirit growth +38. Special effect, heroic spirit space. Summon heroic spirits. Heroic spirit space. This is a special space. War souls and heroic spirits can hibernate, grow, and recover their strength in this space. Summon heroic spirit. Summon heroic spirits to assist in battle. Heroic spirits will return to the heroic spirit space after death. Su Lin wasn't surprised when he saw the Martyr's Palace's attributes. From today onwards, the soldiers of Northwind Dukedom would be reborn in the heroic spirit space after death. These war souls would also slowly grow. After some time, these war souls would slowly level up to heroic spirits. With the Martyr's Palace, the soldiers of Northtown City would be even more fearless. After the Martyr's Palace and the Triumphal Arch were combined, the heroic spirit space doubled in size. At the same time, it gained a new special effect, the War God's Blessing. War God's Blessing. In cities or regions blessed by the War God, the chances of newborns becoming excellent warriors are increased. Newborns will naturally gain +1 strength. After seeing the effects of the War God's Blessing, Su Lin was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. All newborns gained +1 strength. This was an area of effect. This special effect was very similar to the Sky Garden's Elemental Land. The only difference was that one increased the aptitude of a wizard, while the other increased the aptitude of a warrior. With these two special effects, Northtown City would have an endless supply of wizards and warriors. At the same time, more and more people would be willing to live here. The completion of the Martyr's Palace caused quite a commotion. All the churches in Northtown City sensed the powerful energy. They all came out to take a look. After seeing the Martyr's Palace, these churches were also shocked. They raised Sullen's strength by another level. After completing the construction of the Martyr's Palace, Su Lin let out a breath of relief. He then returned to the Castellan's palace to attend the welcoming banquet. It was a silent night. The first rays of the morning sun shone into the room. Su Lin slowly woke up from his deep sleep. Su Lin had gotten a lot of satisfaction last night, so he slept until noon before waking up. There was still a faint fragrance lingering at the tip of his nose, and his fingertips seemed to still have the soft and delicate touch from last night. The bodies of the women were like octopuses wrapped around his body, and even the messy traces of last night's madness could still be clearly seen. Thinking back to last night's madness, Su Lin was still reminiscing about it. Coupled with the seductive bodies around him, his body became erect again. Last night's battle between the three heroes didn't tire him at all. Under his thunderbolt spear, the three women were utterly defeated. They even had to call their two maids over to defend against Sullen's attacks. Originally, their alliance was still very strong. Su Lin couldn't break through for a long time. In the end, he had to use his plasma cannon to break through the situation. With the support of the thunderbolt spear, Su Lin charged back and forth. The women's alliance crumbled in the end. Of course, they were defeated with honor. In the end, under Sullen's ultimate skill, they could only wait to be slaughtered. Could be said that they suffered heavy casualties. Su Lin struggled to get out of bed. He had a simple breakfast and then went to the new city located in the west of the northern citadel. The new city was 50 kilometers away from the northern citadel. With Sullen's speed, he arrived here in no time. After not seeing each other for 2 months, the new city had changed a lot. The low and simple camp had disappeared and was replaced by a city wall. The city wall was 8 meters tall and 4 to 6 meters thick. Therefore, the city wall was made of bricks and rocks. The wizards then used mud to stone to create this solid city wall. Other than the city wall, many houses were built in the new city. Now, the workers here were living in the new houses. When Boulder and Johnson knew that Su Lin had come here, they quickly brought people back. During this time, the two of them had been in charge of the defense of the new city. The bandits and monsters around the new city had mostly been cleared. A large number of monster slaves were also captured here. Currently, there were 5,000 to 6,000 residents in the new city. Its purpose was to protect the trade route and increase the population. With the increase of immigrants, this city would soon develop as the only way to reach the northern citadel. Chapter 430. The moon was dark, and the wind was howling. It was already late at night outside Northtown City, and the bustling city during the day had now fallen into silence. A team of soldiers on night patrol walked past the long street. They were in the outer area of Northtown City, and there were no other buildings around except for a simple campsite. It was a large amount of empty space reserved for Northtown City's upgrade. There was usually no one here during the day, and it was even more desolate at night. Even the soldiers on night patrol rarely came here. Creak, creak. All of a sudden, some noises reverberated in the silent night. Closely after that, the noises disappeared. A few minutes later, the noises reverberated again. Soon, several black figures, about 1.3 in height, drilled out of the fence of the camp. "It's safe. There's no one here," a dog-like voice said in dragon language. "Be careful, keep an eye out, and alert us immediately if you find anything wrong," another voice said. The dark clouds in the sky were blown away, and the silver moonlight shone on the ground. With the help of the hazy moonlight, a few black figures slowly appeared. They had dark brown scales, another sharp horn on their heads, and the heads of dogs. They were short and wore tattered clothes. They were a few kobolds. "Hurry and inform the oracle that everything is safe." After observing for a while, one of the kobolds, who seemed to be the leader, said. The kobold beside him immediately went back into the fence. "Lord Oracle, we've already checked, and everything is normal outside." The kobold lowered his voice and said excitedly, "Everything is normal outside, then we'll take action immediately." The kobold oracle in a brown linen robe said with a nod, "Lord Oracle, please come with me." As they moved forward quietly, the kobolds quickly climbed out of the hole in the fence. Everything went surprisingly smoothly, and no one was alarmed when the hundreds of devout believers came out. After seeing all the kobolds come out, a look of joy flashed across the oracle's face. He looked at the sky, and at this moment, the moon was covered by dark clouds again. The entire Northtown City was plunged into darkness. "This is a God-given opportunity. Everyone follow us. We're going to escape this cage today. May the Wuxia clan ancestor bless us." After saying that, the kobolds all bowed and prayed. Then, under the cover of the night, they carefully crept towards the city walls. At this moment, in the camp, in the guard's room, a few soldiers were staring at the group of dog-headed people who were carefully escaping. "Captain, are we really not going to capture these fugitives? Are we going to let them escape?" A young soldier asked doubtfully. "This is the Lord's order. Do you dare to disobey?" The captain next to him glanced at him and said, "Hee, I wouldn't dare." The soldier laughed dryly. "By the way, Captain, do you know why Sir Lord is doing this?" The captain next to him knocked on the soldier's head. "Mind your own business. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask." The soldier shrunk his head and nodded. The captain turned around and continued to observe the dog-headed people outside. However, he thought to himself, "How would I know what Sir Lord is going to do?" Under the cover of the night, hundreds of dog-headed people quickly found their way to the vicinity of the city walls. They searched near the city walls for a while and soon found a sewer. The sewer was not large, but it was connected to the moat outside the city. The sewer was not large, and an adult would not be able to get in at all. However, it was not a problem for the short dog-headed people. A few dog-headed people got into the sewer, and then crawled out along the sewer. Soon, the dog-headed people climbed along the sewer to the edge of the city walls. The sewer of the city would lead to the moat, and then flow out from the moat. However, there were not many of such sewers. They had already seen the moat, but in the end, there was an iron fence that was as thick as a finger at the point where the sewer was connected to the moat. Seeing that they were about to escape, but they were blocked by the iron fence, the dog-headed people were enraged. Bang! A strong dog-headed person slammed the iron fence hard. In the end, something shocking happened. The iron fence that was as thick as a finger broke open at the point where it was connected to the wall. Seeing this, the dog-headed person was overjoyed. He grabbed the iron fence with both hands and shook it hard. As the rubble on the wall slid down, the iron fence blocking the exit of the sewer was pushed to the ground with a clang. "It's open! It's open!" A few dog-headed people cheered excitedly. "What's that sound? Who's there?" At that moment, a loud shout came from afar. Then they saw faint figures moving toward them. "Oh no, we've been discovered. Let's go." Seeing those figures, the dog-headed people immediately panicked. "Don't panic, there's still time. The sewer is open. Everyone go into the sewer immediately." Seeing the other dog-headed people panicking, the dog-headed person known as the God's messenger immediately commanded. It was obvious that this dog-headed person had a high status among them. As soon as he spoke, all the dog-headed people immediately recovered and jumped into the sewer. After the dog-headed people entered the sewer, they did not stop at all. Instead, they quickly crawled toward the moat not far away. By the time the soldiers strolled over, all the dog-headed people had successfully escaped. Only when the dog-headed people had escaped a distance away from northern Battlefront City along the moat did they stop, panting. "We've escaped, we've escaped." The dog-headed people cheered excitedly. After the dog-headed people cheered for a while, the dog-headed God's messenger, Horn, raised his arm. Soon all the dog-headed people quieted down. "My brethren, although we've successfully escaped from the enslavement of those humans, we're not safe now. So we need to leave this place as soon as possible. The great elder Wuxia has given us an oracle. He has prepared a God-given land for us to live and develop. Praise the true God. Praise the true God. Praise the true God." A wave of cheers sounded, and the dog-headed people's morale rose again. "Okay, let's set off now. We'll go to our new home," Horn ordered, and the dog-headed people set off again. However, what the dog-headed people did not know was that there were a few eagles circling above their heads. At the same time, not far away from them, a few drows were hiding and quietly observing the dog-headed people. In fact, the dog-headed people's successful escape from northern Battlefront City was completely arranged by Sulen. Otherwise, not to mention the dog-headed people, even a group of knights would not have been able to escape easily. The oracle that Horn mentioned was completely made up by Sulen. Even the escape route that the dog-headed people took was prepared by Sulen. To put it bluntly, it was all a big show that Sulen had written and directed. It was just that the dog-headed people did not know about it. After letting Hathaway use the dream-weaving spell, he successfully used the so-called oracle to guide Horn's actions and make the dog-headed person act according to Sullen's instructions. This was also Sullen's way of deceiving the dog-headed people because they were not intelligent. Sulen let the dog-headed people out to let them develop on their own. If he kept interfering with the dog-headed people's development, he would easily be discovered by the evil god that they now believed in. Now, he let them develop on their own and only sent people to monitor them secretly. When the fruit was ripe, they would come and pick it. Horn led the dog-headed people to the north of northern Battlefront City in high spirits. They had night vision, so they could see well at night. The other monsters around northern Battlefront City had already been cleared, so the dog-headed people did not encounter any other wild beasts at night. However, as soon as they left northern Battlefront City, a ferocious wolf set its eyes on them. Ferocious wolves were a common ferocious beast in the northern wilderness. They were over 4 meters long and 1.7 to 2 meters tall. They usually hunted in pairs. As soon as they discovered the dog-headed people, they immediately attacked them. Facing such a ferocious beast, the dog-headed people did not even have weapons. The ferocious wolf easily rushed into their formation. After biting a few dog-headed people to death, it retreated with the corpses. The rest of the dog-headed people took the opportunity to run for their lives. Fortunately, the ferocious wolf did not continue to chase after them after finding food. After encountering the ferocious wolf, the dog-headed people did not encounter any other monsters for the rest of their journey. When the sky gradually brightened, the dog-headed people arrived at a secluded valley. The valley was shaped like a horn. The entrance was small, but the inside was big. There was also a pool of flowing water in the innermost part. There were also some statues and stone carvings not far from the pool. This valley was a ruin discovered by Su Len. The area of the valley was not big, but it was the perfect place for the dog-headed people to nest. After being enslaved in northern Battlefront City for a long time, these dog-headed people had learned how to grow potatoes and other crops. Although they could not be compared to humans, it was not a problem for them to feed their small tribe. After arriving at the valley, Horn finally let out a sigh of relief. This was the God-given land that the god in his dream told him about. After arriving at the valley, all the dog-headed people quickly began to build under Horn's command. In order to let them develop more believers, Su Len purposely drove the surrounding dog-headed people and goblins to this area. As the evil god's priest, Horn naturally absorbed these goblins and dog-headed people. At this rate, this tribe that believed in the evil god would rapidly grow. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.